So the next thing you will need are your right to rent checks. Remember this one, this is a biggie. Your right to rent effectively confirms that the tenant that moves into the property has the right to reside in the UK and has the right to live in your property. You'll need to carry out right to rent checks which make sure of the status, the immigration status of the tenant. So who do you need to do checks on? That's the question. Now if you've got Mr. and Mrs. Smith going on to the tenancy, yes, you need to do right to rent checks on them. But if they've got a child that's 18 or over, you'll also need to do the right to rent checks on that occupant as well. So just remember that, it's really serious because it's immigration. Now, here's where it gets a bit tricky. If you move a tenant into the property that has a fixed period of stay in the UK, then you'll need to renew the right to rent checks every single year. You'll need to double check how long their fixed period of stay is. And here's where it gets worrying for landlords, and I've heard this story quite a few times, I'm afraid. So Mr. and Mrs. Landlord, you move in a tenant into the property and you leave them to it. And then 2 years down the line, that tenant's not living there anymore, but they're still on the tenancy. And what they've done is just rented it out to another tenant. You're liable, Mr. and Mrs. Landlord. That's where it gets tricky. Because if your tenant that's living in your property does not have the right to reside in this country, then you are going to be in serious trouble with immigration. So make sure you get those right. You need to get the right documents from the tenant, the right information, the right identification from the tenant, and they need to sign the right to rent checks that you've done.